Hi everyone, no snazzy intro this time, it's just the materials tutorial, part of a series of tutorials on design. Understanding materials and their properties can be instrumental in getting a design off the ground. In this tutorial, we'll be discussing the properties of some commonly encountered materials and the stresses and loads that they're best at standing up to. So your next question should be, what are stresses and loads? There's an important distinction between strength and stiffness. A strong structure can withstand large loads without failing or breaking, whereas a stiff structure can withstand large loads without bending, twisting, or even moving. Many materials are strong without being stiff. For example, rope is extremely strong. A huge force needs to be applied before it breaks. But even when it's stretched taut, rope is never stiff. So keep in mind which criterion you need in your design. Does the component need to be completely stiff, or can it simply be strong? So far we've been talking about loads without actually explaining what they are, so now's a good time as any. The loads you'll likely encounter in day-to-day life as well as in the process of design can be broadly sorted into three categories: compression loads, tension loads, and shear loads. Compression is when the structure under load is being squished. For example, the legs of your chair are under compression because your weight is compressing them. Tension is when a structure under load is being stretched or pulled. So maybe instead of sitting on a chair, you're sitting on a hammock or a swing set, then the chains or rope holding you up are under tension because they're being pulled on. Now shear is a little harder to understand. A shear load will try to move or slide one part of a structure past another part of the same structure. Imagine tearing a paper or aluminum foil. What you're actually doing is moving one half of the sheet away from the other half, and as a result the sheet tears. This is an example of shear load. Many of the deformations that we see on a day-to-day basis can be thought of as composed of these three types of loading. For example, bending is a combination of both tension and compression stress. Hang on a second, this tutorial was supposed to be about materials, right? Anyways, now we'll move on to material selection with these loads in mind. Different materials obviously are suited to handling different loads. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some general purpose materials that you're likely to encounter. Number one, wood. Hardwoods such as oak or maple are stiffer and stronger under compression than softwoods like fir or cedar. But wood in general is pretty alright in compression, tension, and shear loading. The orientation of the wood is important because wood isn't homogeneous, meaning it's not the same everywhere. The patterns that you see on wood furniture are actually growth rings in the wood called wood grain, and the wood strength depends on how the load is oriented relative to the grain of the wood. If you're interested in wood grain, you can Google it, but we're not going to waste your time with it here. Cardboard and cardstock. Working with cardboard or stiff paper like cardstock can be challenging. These materials bend easily, although strategic folding and creasing will help with that. They're not very strong, but they're very easy to cut and shape and fold, so sometimes for light duty applications they can be ideal. Moving on to metals. Common structural metals are steel, aluminium, and brass. Aluminium is the most malleable, meaning it's the most easy to bend. Steel is the stiffest and the strongest, and brass is in between. But in general, metals are very strong in compression and even stronger in tension. The harder metals such as hard steel are also very strong in shear. However, almost all metals suffer from work hardening, which means that they become harder and more brittle if they're bent or stretched. This means if you're bending a sheet of aluminium and the bend is in the wrong place, and you end up unbending and rebending, your aluminium will be much weaker and it might just snap. If you're interested in work hardening and how to fix it, again, Google is your friend. Pertaining to plastics that you might commonly encounter include PVC, acrylic, nylon, and 3D printed materials like ABS and PLA. Sometimes it's helpful to think of plastics as lighter and less strong metals because their properties are similar, and this is why plastic is often used in place of metal when weight, corrosion, or cost is important. Finally, we're going to do a short study on specialized materials. For compression loads, we have materials like brick, ceramic, and cement. These materials are very stiff and they're impossible to squish and squash, but if you try and twist a brick or bend it, it crumbles easily. Likewise, you couldn't weave a rope out of brick fibers. So brick, ceramic, and cement are really cheap, but they're kinda heavy, and they're great for compression and not much else. As a general rule, brittle materials are strong under compression and weak under tension. Makes sense, right? For tension loads, rope and chain are great. They're never stiff, but they're super strong in tension. You can break a rope by shearing it with shears, and it's easy to squish, but good luck trying to pull it apart. So in this tutorial, we've covered some commonly encountered materials and their general properties, but there's much more information on the internet for which there was no space in this video. So just keep in mind your loads, your need for strength versus stiffness, and select a material that's readily available to you that you can easily cut, form, and work with, and that is affordable. So that's it for this tutorial. Check out our other design tutorials if you like, but until then, happy CADing.